Hey, what's going on, beautiful Jellyfish? This is Tracy, and today I'm going to be doing a video on Magic coverage. I used to actually watch like a lot of coverage on Magic, and then I kind of got out of the swing of it, and now recently I have this whole thing that I want to get better at Magic, so I'm like watching Magic like very intently. I'm almost done with SCG Columbus? Yes, SCG Columbus, which was from January, which was a modern open. And then after that, I'm going to watch Dallas because that was this past weekend. So I definitely want to check that out. But I wanted to do a video talking about Magic coverage and talking about a couple of things to note if you're someone who wants to watch Magic coverage more, or just a couple of things that I've noticed watching it that I think are really important. Couple of tips. So the first thing is don't watch Magic coverage if it bores you. That used to be me. I used to be like, why would anyone want to watch this? This is like terrible. And then now actually I'm back to enjoying it. I find a lot of joy in it, and I think part of it too, it's one of those things that, are you being like passive or like actually reacting to what's going on? So if you're just like sitting watching it, but like you should be sitting watching it, like making notes in your head, going through the play-by-plays, like, which we'll actually talk about in a little bit, but I think that's really important. I think it's one of those things, like, if you're just watching it to watch it, like, but not do anything with it, that's, like, totally not as valuable and actually maybe more boring. But if you're paying attention and, like, being like, hey, why did this player make this line of play? I would have done X instead of that. I think that's, like, really important and helps you be more engaged into what you're actually watching. The number two are the types of coverage, or a couple of the types of coverage you can watch. First would be like opens. Star City Games has probably just like the best coverage. Cedric Phillips and Patrick Sullivan are like really enjoyable, and they're really funny, and they're really great people to watch. So that's always been really great to watch. I love watching opens. Another thing too that you can watch are Channel Fireball has really sweet coverage too, and they do like the things where they have like their whole team of like people, and like they have, you know, like Gabriel and Asif, it was on like this Grixis control or like Jace control build, and he like did a deck tech, and then he also did like matches on like Magic Online, like doing that. Those are really good too because they're very long. So like if you're someone who's like, hey, I want to get really good at like this one deck, Channel Fireball is like the place for you, because you have all these like pro players and like really good Magic players who break down the deck, explain the deck, and then like you watch them play it and they talk through what moves they're doing. It's really good if you're like, hey, I'm building this one deck and I just want to see how other people pilot it. Really, really important. I really recommend those two types of things. So number three is to keep the content that you're watching current. Now, I feel as though I'm being slight of a bad example on this situation because I told you guys I was just watching Star City Columbus, and that was from January, and you may be like, it's March, that's not really that far off, but here's the deal, is the format's like totally changed now. You have Bloodbraid Elf unbanning and Jace unbanning, the format's looking totally different. So it is still relevant, of course, like it's not like it's that far off. It's not like I'm watching coverage from like 2016, because listen, the format is so different. Because listen, cards change, which means that the format changes. So watching coverage from then, you know, like if I'm watching like Splinter Twin games, it's not really that valuable because like Twin's not in the format anymore, so I wouldn't really recommend that. So for example, I mentioned that SCG Dallas Fort Worth was this weekend. So that would be a really good thing to watch if you're like someone who's looking, you know, you're like, hey, what coverage should I watch? That would be a really good thing to check that out. Number four is to focus specifically when you're watching coverage on your deck and like variations of your deck. So for example, I am running Grixis Control in Modern right now. However, when I was watching SCG COL, there were, that sounds like really weird to say, like hashtag SCG COL. Like it totally makes sense when you like read it in writing, but saying it out loud just sounds really weird. Columbus, when I was watching SCG Columbus, Kevin Jones was piloting Jeskai Control. I don't run Jeskai Control, but it's a variation of Control, and I run a lot of similar cards. So am I paying attention avidly to all the matches? Of course, but I'm specifically giving attention to Kevin Jones running that deck because it's a variation of my deck, and I want to see Kevin Jones is like really good at piloting Control decks, so I'm like, okay, cool, definitely gonna pay attention and see what he's doing specifically. And I especially mentioned the variations because, like, you may be running different cards or maybe different colors, but it's all the same variation of, you know, like, Control's a really good example because, again, Grixis and Jeskai are different, they run different colors, but they have a lot of similarities. They both run things like Snapcaster Mage and Lightning Bolt, so, like, you know, what, how do those decks are similar? So I specifically pay attention to that, even though that the decks have differences, because Control's Control. If you can pilot Control, you could pilot, like, any version of Control pretty much. However, like, sub note of that, number 5, is still pay attention to other decks. This is, like, really important, and I feel like some people can kind of get lost in the rabbit hole of watching coverage and only watching their deck perform. Guys, it's super important to watch other people pilot decks that you may never run. For example, I'm never ever gonna run Tron. I would cut my foot off before I built Tron. However, it's still valuable for me to watch how Tron is piloted. This, I feel like, was especially a huge thing, like, when, like, Bloom Titan was a thing. I mean, now you have kind of see that. Sometimes there was this one guy at Star City this week in the Open that was running Amulet, and I was like, I am rooting for this guy so hard. I think he got into, like, the top 32 as well, which was super cool. But anyways, so Tron. So, like, I'm never ever gonna run Tron in my life, but it's important for me to watch the deck so I know, like, how it's piloted. I can see the different variations. Oh wow, this one guy's running this card. I didn't expect to see that, or whatever. So, like, for example, when I was watching Columbus from January, Emma Handy was on Infect. Infect's a deck, like, I'll never ever pilot in my life, but it's really important for me to see. You know, so I can familiarize myself with the deck, and I can see, you know, if you said, hey Tracy, can you list to me Infect cards? I would be like, Mutagenic Growth? What else is in Infect? I don't know, I can't think of the cards off the top of my head. But moral of the story is, I want to be familiar and see what's going on in the deck so that I can know what kind of tricks and what kind of things are coming. So, yeah, that's that. Number 6. So I talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the video, about how, like, when you're watching coverage, be super reactive to it. And so, like, I always watch, like, the players' hands, and I like to see, what do they got going on in their hands? Like, I'm a Control player, so I'm like, okay, they've got Snapcaster Mage in their hand, and they've got, like, Sphinx's Rev and Bolt in their graveyard, like, you know, and all this other stuff. Like, what are they gonna do? And I react to the lines of play that they're doing. And did you do something different than the player? And, like, why did they do what they did? So it's like, if you can't answer, like, why they did what they did, I feel like that's not good. I think you should always be watching and saying, okay, because, like, realistically, guys, there's so many different lines of play. There could be, like, 20 different lines of play in one move while you have, like, 6 mana open. Now, some of them are really bad lines of play, like lightning bolting yourself. Probably not the best move. Maybe if you're playing Death's Shadow and you need to lightning bolt yourself, because that would boost your Death's Shadow. But I feel like you should just do that to your opponent. I don't know, but, like, lightning bolting yourself is usually probably not a good thing. I don't know, Paul runs Death's Shadow and he bolts himself sometimes. I don't know. Sometimes it is the best move. But moral of the story is there's, like, 20 lines of play in the game. A lot of them are going to be significantly better than the others. And when you're watching a game, you may see a player do something, like, questionable, and you're like, why did they just do this? If I were them, I probably would have done that differently. And this other idea, number 7, the last note, is question people's lines of plays. I feel like so many times people are like, well, they're a pro, like, they can't be wrong. Untrue, fam. Everyone makes mistakes, even pro players, regardless of how good of a Magic player you are. And to be completely honest, like, there could be a line of play that you make that in your head, you're like, this is the best move I could possibly do. And then someone may be like after, hey, why'd you do that instead of, like, this? And I think having, like, that reason to be like, okay, well, I was trying to play around a counterspell, or I was trying to do this, or whatever. So I think it's, like, really important to know why they're making lines of plays, but maybe sometimes they wouldn't always be right. And, you know, trying to get inside their head and say, okay, why exactly did they do this? It made so much sense to them to make this line of play. Why did they do that? So, guys, that was it. That was it for talking about tips on, like, watching Magic coverage. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I got for this video, but I will see you guys in my next.